And we're joined by Juan Rodriguez of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. Thanks for giving us a couple minutes. And big series this weekend between the Phillies and the Marlins, and now just within a game of each other now, I believe, for first place in the NL East, right?
Absolutely. I believe it's half a game, actually, going into the series here. So first time these two teams are matching up, so pretty curious to see how they stack up against each other.
Now, the Marlins have been a very interesting team this year. Certainly not a team that everybody was expecting to come out and, I think, play as well as they have this year. But really, there are a lot of good young players on this team. And I think that now, after they kind of redeveloped the team once again after the last World Series win, and they flushed out some of the players like the Delgados and the Juan Pierres and something like that, I feel like a lot of these young players who have now had a couple years to kind of have a chance to develop, they've really kind of established themselves, and plus they were good a couple years ago when Joe Girardi was the manager for 1 year.
Oh, absolutely. I think what happens is a lot of people see the $21 million payroll and they equate that with, having bad players, when in actuality it just means the players that they do have just don't have a lot of Major League service time yet to garner those big money contracts. But you're right, the core that they have right here has, most of them are going to be arbitration eligible going into next year, so this is their third full season, and there's a lot of talent on this team. Obviously, you start with Hanley Ramirez, who's already been rewarded with the big contract extension for $70 million, and you go down from there, Dan Uggla, Mike Jacobs, Josh Willingham, who's hurt now. But, all these guys have, proven they can hit the ball in the major leagues, and, they're keeping them competitive so far.
And Dennis Brown here alongside. We have Juan Rodriguez from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel talking about the Phillies and the Marlins this weekend. And we mentioned very interesting series. The Marlins have played very well, and the Phillies have actually started to come on now. They've won their last 4 games, so they're on a little bit of a hot streak. And you were also talking about some of the young players. One of the players you mentioned was Hanley Ramirez. You mentioned him being rewarded with a contract. There are some questions about what players on the Marlins may be rewarded with contracts and which ones don't. Marlins don't have a ton of money to spend around, but who's going to be the core of this team, you think, in the next couple years? Obviously, they've made the commitment there, but you're not sure about guys like Uggla and some of the other players on the team if they're going to necessarily be around. What's your sense on what this team might look like in the next couple years? Who's going to be sticking around? Who's might not be sticking around?
That's a good question. One thing that the Marlins made very clear during the Hanley Ramirez press conference was that they have not made any more recommendations to owner Jeffrey Loria about signing anybody to multi-year deals. You look at it from one standpoint, I think as you go into next season, again, with all the arbitration-eligible players, I think they'll probably pinpoint 1 or 2 guys to lock up, but it's not something they have to do right now, and they just have a philosophy where they're so, I don't know if hesitant is the word, but so careful about giving those multi-year deals, because they're not a franchise like the Yankees where they can absorb, it's like Carl Pavano signing where they get nothing for $40 million. I mean, they really have to, be right when they make that kind of commitment. Dan Uggla, I think, is a guy who's potentially could be somebody that they move forward with just because of the unique offense that he gives them from that position. I mean, you don't see a lot of second basemen out there with outside of maybe Chase Utley that have that 40 home run potential. One thing with Dan is he is a little older now. He's 28, so he's not your typical up and coming prospect. But I think Jeremy Hermida, the right fielder, another guy, if he shows he can stay healthy for a full season and productive, is another guy who might garner multi-year consideration down the road. So I think those are the 2 guys that you probably start out with. And, from a pitching standpoint, I think they're going to be pretty careful just because of the nature of the game and, with injuries and how common it is in pitching. You're probably going to see them go more year to year with the pitchers than the position players.
Juan Rodriguez joining us in Coastal Broadcasting. And this weekend, this could be a very important series for the Marlins. And again, I'm not around the team you are. Maybe you can tell us, but they started off. They won the first game against the Mets. The Mets have come back. One they were able to win last night in an extra inning game, and the Mets have actually won a couple games in a row, and they did it against the Marlins. Could this be a damaging kind of week for the Marlins if say the Phillies come out of here and take 2 out of 3? Is this team so young that they could maybe start thinking bad thoughts about what's going to happen this season, or do you think that they'll be resilient no matter what happens this weekend? Or technically, could these series damage basically where their mind state is for the rest of the season?
Well, I think it wouldn't be totally unexpected if they come back home no longer in first place. I mean, you look at this road trip here. You got 3 in New York, 3 in Philadelphia, and then they go to Atlanta for 4 games as well. But the one reason that I think that regardless of what happens, it won't crush their whole season is just because they do have a veteran presence in the clubhouse that I think won't let it happen. You look at Luis Gonzalez, who's a guy they brought in on a 1-year deal, and he's gotten a fair bit of playing time with Josh Willingham on the disabled list, and he's really proven to be just such a great force in there. A guy that the Marlins, with some of the young players, can look to and have a great example of that professionalism. On the pitching side, Mark Hendrickson has done the same thing as well. Kevin Gregg, another guy in the bullpen who I think is, the leader and is not going to let anybody get their head down. So, I think regardless of what happens during this trip, the Marlins have shown that they can play with anybody so far. You look at that sweep at home of the Diamondbacks about a week ago. So, I think they're going to, move ahead regardless of how this turns out.